families talking about being black and brown in America today and in the past can be really hard. And it's our Newsy Tonight focus. Joining us tonight is a familiar face to all of our viewers. Movies like The Best Man, How Stella Got Her Groove Back, Brown Sugar, and my personal favorite on stage, Rent. Rent and the 90s Changed My Life. Also now the author of Why? A Conversation About Race. Taye Diggs. Mr. Diggs, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This book is very much inspired by this moment, real life. Do these draw on real conversations you've had?
Similar conversations. I was inspired to write this because of some of the talks me and my 12-year-old son have had. And during these conversations, I was struck with the idea that sometimes in life, and this is one of the reasons why I went ahead and wrote the book, as a parent, sometimes the answers to some of the questions that were asked aren't tied up in a tiny little colorful bow. Sometimes it's not about right or wrong or black or white or up or down. Sometimes answering these questions can be uncomfortable, and there isn't necessarily an answer, or not an answer that is going to make either party happy. And I wanted to experiment with that in this book. You know what I mean? I'm sure children all across the globe were looking at what was happening here in America during Black Lives Matter and wondering what the deal was. And I wanted to do my best to give an accurate portrayal of at least my perspective as the way it applies to my son as well.
Well, and I wonder how you even got to that, because the kids in your book, they get these really succinct answers, from these really wonderful grandparents and parents to questions that entire textbooks have been written about. What was your process for distilling that? Because they are such complex topics.
I don't want to get too woo-woo here, but I really feel like sometimes, the words just kind of come to me and I'm just writing them down, whether, people can choose to believe what they want. But that's how I know something is kind of supposed to come through me when I don't have much thought, and it just comes out. And this is one of those situations. I owe a lot to kind of the writing style that I used to my mother and the way that she read to me. And there was always she always read books to me that had a certain rhythm to them. And I love the fact that, some of the little sentences, they kind of come back, almost like the chorus of a song. So, all of that kind of lends itself to my writing and more specifically to this book.
In this book, you focus on injustices. The preface to it calls them straightforward and challenging conversations. Why did you choose that approach?
Honestly, I just was trying to be as honest as I could, because I was just telling someone else, as a person, I lean more towards, seeing the bright side, seeing the positive side, trying to be positive. But I think just in the world, we've come to a point where that's not necessarily working. And in order for us, I think, this is just my opinion, to really get to the bottom of some of these issues, it's going to have to get a little uncomfortable. And I think we've been avoiding that for a long time. And I think, for me, I wanted to include my kid, in that discussion where this is the truth. And, instead of saying, what's happening, whether it be right or wrong, let's try to figure out why. And that it seemed to be pretty accurate to me.
This is kind of the height of the book, and I wanted to read just a piece of it and really understand here. A child asks the family, finally all the elders are gathered, and they ask, why are those buildings burning? And the family answers, well, little one, when we get tired of shouting and not being heard, when we have cried so many tears from always getting hurt, when we scream out for help and continue to get ignored, when we march and march and march but are not really moving, when all this happens, sometimes buildings must burn. The buildings burn for us. The anger burning those buildings is us. The word must sticks out. I assume that was intentional. What did you mean by buildings must burn?
I just feel like that's what's what's happening in the world, you know. And I, you know, it can, as you can imagine, it can get tiring because that's how the world works. You know what I mean? You take a dam and you fill it with water, and you know, after a while, if you don't take care of that dam, the water is going to burst. You know, like with dealing with my son, if I'm busy with work and he keeps asking me to play with him, I'm going to see him deal with me in a different way. And I feel like that's what's happening with the world, with the pandemic, with Black Lives Matter, with the ozone. That we need to kind of deal with these situations, or we're going to be faced with deeper problems on a deeper level. And I think that's what's going on right now.
It sounds like, Taye, that you were trying to get us to really talk about some things that are really hard as they are, and really hard to talk about. By the end, we see the family praying for peace. And what do we do? And they pray. And even visually, it gets lighter and brighter. I personally pray every day. I love that, you know, prayers in there. But I also wonder, any thoughts on what we can do ourselves in our communities?
I think talking about these issues seriously, without the idea of fixing them in the moment, you know, without the idea of, you know, in this conversation, what can I say that will make you feel better? I think we have to literally get our hands dirty and talk about how we actually feel and start there. Other than that, I don't know. You know what I mean? But I think the desire is a good thing, and I think it can start there.
The book is Why. So many people would be too scared to take on such big topics, and you just dive right in. Taye Diggs, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. This was great. I appreciate it.